Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2018 Professor Messer A+ Study Group from our world headquarters in Tallahassee, Florida. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this next hour or so of Q&A. We've got an entire hour where I ask you questions, and then interactively online, you can participate by answering those if you're here during the live stream. If this is a replay, it's difficult to participate live. I guess you could, but it'd be a different thing altogether. In the second part of the show, it's really the after show. In the second hour, I'll open up some phone lines. We'll have you call in with questions. I'll take questions from the chat room about anything. It doesn't have to be about A+ or certifications or even IT. It can be about anything that you would like to talk about. I'm fine with that as well. Thanks for joining us, though. So glad to have you here. If you are watching this on a replay, you can always follow along. Even though you can't interactively choose the right answer, you can certainly do it by yourself there on the screen and watch what's going on. There is plenty to talk about with everything going on with the A+ and everything else for those things. And I'll tell you in just a moment how you can participate live and answer these questions. And you'll find instructions for everything, of course, at professormesser.com/live. If you are watching this on YouTube, you'll notice there's no chat there. But if you go to professormesser.com/live, you'll find the chat at the bottom of that screen. Thank you so much for your ongoing support through the month. I do one of these A+ study groups every month. I do a Network Plus study group and a Security Plus study group. There's the phone numbers for later. Those numbers aren't up and running right now, but you'll be able to hit those during the second hour, and I'll, of course, mention it when we get to there. You, of course, can always follow what we're doing here by going to YouTube, professormesser.com/YouTube. Subscribe. You're welcome to hit the bell or not hit the bell. That's completely up to you. Follow every day on Twitter. There's a new A+ pop quiz every weekday at professormesser.com/Twitter. It's a good place to get some extra practice. And, of course, don't forget about the discount vouchers available at professormesser.com/vouchers. So that'd be something to consider as well. We're going to, sometime during this first hour, give you instructions on how you can earn a webinar CEU just by watching this. And you can either watch it live or you can watch it on the replay, and I'll still give you a CEU because I'm able to give out the special code word at some point during this first hour. So keep listening, and I'll explain exactly how you can earn that CEU and the process you should take to earn that CEU as soon as we get to that point at some time during that first hour. So stick around for that as well. Let's talk about the A+ exam, though. That's why we're here. The A+ exam currently is the 22901 exam and the 22902 exam. It's two exams you have to pass. You have to pass both of those to earn your A+ certification. This is an exam that's been around since December 15th, 2015. Generally, we see updates from CompTIA on these exams about every 3 years. So if you did the math, you could figure out that sometime in the December-ish timeframe, you will probably see a new set of exams released. Now, that's still okay with you because the CompTIA tends to give you another 6 months of overlap where you could still take the current exam. So right now, we're here on July the 11th, 2018. I expect that sometime around this time next year, you will finally see these exams retired. So if you're planning to start studying, go ahead and start studying. You can get certified well before the end of the year and certainly before 12 months have gone by. So this is not something you should ever wait for. Never wait to get certified. There's way too many advantages in having that certification. So make sure that if you're working towards your A+, keep doing it. You've got plenty of time. Everything's right on schedule. You're not going to have a problem with that at all. If you are already A+ certified, you don't have to take the exams again. You can renew your certification by taking a higher level renewal exam from CompTIA, which is what I should put there, because if you do it from CompTIA, if you take your Network Plus or Security Plus or some of those higher level exams, you don't have to pay any CEU maintenance fees. You just pay for your exam, and as soon as you pass that second and higher level exam, it automatically will renew your A+ for 3 years starting at that point. You could take a higher level third-party exam. That's one you will have to pay CEUs fees. And CompTIA released almost a year ago now renewal exams. Again, if you take a CompTIA renewal exam, then you don't have to pay any CEU fees either. And of course, you could earn CEUs, as I mentioned here before. The one thing I want to be sure everyone is aware of, because these are relatively new from CompTIA, is what CompTIA calls the Cert Master CE. So if you currently have your A+ certification, you're down to the last week before your A+ certification expires. You don't want this certification to expire. You can take the CertMaster CE. You purchase it online on the CompTIA website. It's a computer-based training application. It takes 3 to 6 hours, and you earn all of the CEUs you need to renew your certification. And you're done instantly. So if you're down to the last day of your certification, you could theoretically take, don't do that by the way, but you could theoretically take the CertMaster CE and be certified. So that's another thing to think about. That's probably the one I would use if I was planning to do this. That way you don't have to collect CEUs. You don't have to send them in. You don't have to get them back. You don't have to pay maintenance fees. You don't have to take a higher level exam. You simply pay for this renewal app and it does everything for you. The A+ certification is 2 exams, different content on both exams. I generally tell people, if you're planning to take these exams, study for one of them, focus on that single exam, go to take the exam, and then pass it. And then shift all of your efforts to the other exam. I don't recommend taking both of these exams on the same day. That would be an enormous amount of content. Unless you're someone who's very, very familiar with this content, you've been in the industry forever, you might have taken these types of exams before. Maybe I could say go ahead and take both of those exams on the same day. I would not take both of these exams on the same day. That's a lot of content. And they're very different in the type of content they have. I do have some practice tests on my website available for free at professormesser.com/popquiz. So if you're looking for some extra Q&A, I take all of these questions that we do during our live events and I put them to an archive over there. You can find that at professormesser.com/popquiz. Also, this podcast, this study group that you're watching live, hopefully with video here on YouTube, is also available as a audio podcast. You can find that at professormesser.com/podcasts. Podcasts should make that easier to say. The podcasts that are there are for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. There are RSS feeds there, so you can add it to an existing podcatching program that you like to use, or you can listen to them on that same page. I've got interactive players right there, so you can go to the page, hit the play button, and listen to this. And of course, the video of these study groups is available immediately afterwards on YouTube. You can also watch the video because that's so much fun to be looking at me. Well, some of these are actually very visual questions, so it may help you to watch some of those questions. Now, I said you will be able to answer questions. I'll ask and you'll answer questions today. You can do that by using an online service called Socrative. And an easy way to find the room in Socrative that you need to go to is go to professormesser.com/QA. The QA stands for something. I can't remember. But go to professormesser.com/QA and there will be a question waiting for you already. Now, there are also apps that you can download for Socrative from your favorite app store. Download the Socrative Student app because you're the student. There is a Socrative Teacher app. That's the one for me. The Socrative Student app is the one for you, and it will ask you for a room name. The room name is, amazingly enough, Professor Messer. Shocking, I know. Now, if you've done all those things, you've typed in professormesser.com/QA, there will be a question waiting for you on the screen, and it says, this is what we call our rewind question, because this is a question from last week to see if you remember. The question is, you're setting up a laptop in the conference room, but the projector is displaying your laptop's background instead of the content of the laptop's LCD screen. Which of these would be the best way to proceed? Would it be to A, specify the video output option in the BIOS? Would it be B, use the laptop's function key to choose the appropriate video configuration? Would it be C, select the correct input option on the projector? Would it be D, fold down and close the laptop screen? Or would it be E, choose the display resolution in the control panel? And as you can see, the folks that are already here answering these questions, 90% of you are saying, yes, use B, the function key, to choose the appropriate video configuration. Some of you must have been here last week, or maybe not. That was a relatively easy one from last week, so I threw it in there. And that would be correct. You would not specify video output in the BIOS. You don't change the projector. You don't do any of those things. You instead deal with all of those things that you might run into of those pieces. So hopefully that's something you've run into as well, something you can tell with all of those. We'll have to see if that's really going to be the case for you and working through those. So let's now go to some additional questions. So hopefully some of you that did choose B, choosing the function key to choose the appropriate video configuration, hopefully that's one that's working for you as well. So let's now shift our gears to a question from this month. I've got some new ones. The questions I have, by the way, that I initially do first thing on these study groups is a performance-based question. You may not realize this when you start getting into looking at some of the exams, but the A+, the Network Plus, Security Plus, a lot of the CompTIA exams are not all multiple choice. Some of the questions, especially at the beginning of the exam, you're going to get a handful of performance-based questions. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge, performance-based questions, because now we want to be able to answer these questions that are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might ask you to do matching. You might have to drag and drop some things. It may pop you off to a command line. So now you're stuck in a command line view. Now what do? The screen pops open. Now it says, type this, perform this function. And you have to figure out what to type in there. So hopefully you will be able to look at that and see what the details of those performance-based questions. So for the study group, the first question I like to give you is a performance-based question. And here is your performance-based question of the day. It is, put these technologies in order from the fastest maximum bandwidth to the slowest. And I've got 4 technologies here. One of them is USB 3.0. The other is Thunderbolt version 2. We've got IEEE 1394B, and we've got SATA revision 2.0. So we need to know these bandwidths, and we need to put them in order from maximum bandwidth to slowest. This is a fill in the blank if you're over on Socrative. So you can fill in, maybe if you think they're already in order, you put in A, B, C, D. There's your answer. You don't have to type in all of the names. You can simply say A, B, C, D, and you're good. And they are not in order, just so you're aware. Those are not in order. They're close. No, they're not close. They're not even remotely close. They are not A, B, C, D. That will be my hint for you, is they are not currently in order. So that would be good. Nobody is putting in A, B, C, D, fortunately. So I didn't throw anyone off with those particular questions. Some folks in the chat room said the mic is clipping. If you're hearing some audio problems, please let me know. We're doing some adjustments. It's a new live stream system to get things going. I adjusted audio and did some testing of it. I think it sounded okay. I brought down the gain just a little bit to see if that made a difference, and we'll have to look at it afterwards to have it there. If you go to the Socrative app, there's nothing to log into. You go to professormesser.com/QA, or if the Socrative app, you go to Room Professor Messer. You don't have to put anything special in there. You can go straight to the room, unless they ask you for some registration or other nonsense like that. I don't have any control of that piece of it. So those are the 4 technologies we need to know. Make sure you know and look at the questions very carefully, especially things that ask you to put things in order. Make sure that you put them in the order it's asking. Maybe that's the better hint for you on this question. Because if you're reading quickly, these are the first questions you hit when you start the exam. There's a lot of adrenaline flowing. You can't understand what you're reading on the screen. You haven't really settled in yet. That's one of the reasons I tell people just skip the performance-based questions. That's what I do. I just skip them completely, and I start with the multiple choice. Because I think the multiple choice are easier to go through. There's less things you have to worry about with multiple choice. You know exactly what you're going to get as far as a process. I go all the way through the multiple choice, then I come back to the performance-based questions. The way that CompTIA allows you to do this is you can jump to any question at any time. Not all tests work this way. For example, Cisco exams, you take the first question. When you answer it, you're done. You can never go back to that first question, and you can't go to any other question. You have to go to the second question. So CompTIA gives you a lot of flexibility here. Take advantage of that. Use that to your advantage. So go through all the multiple choice, make sure you have enough time to come back for the performance-based. That tends to help me too. Let's see how we did with this one. I'm going to go through now these technologies in order from them, what I think should be the fastest maximum bandwidth to the slowest. We'll see if I put these in here. The fastest one, I think, will be Thunderbolt version 2. And why do I think that? Because Thunderbolt V2 operates at a maximum speed of 20 gigabits per second. It's a nice, fast technology to use. In fact, Thunderbolt version 3 gives you even more bandwidth to work with. It's what we use to connect a lot of high-definition video with these different devices. So if you have an option for Thunderbolt, that's a pretty good one to use. I also connect external drives with Thunderbolt in this system that you're seeing right here. Here in the studio, we use all kinds of different things. And I'm recording down here on the little Cylons that you see going back and forth. Those are my recording systems, and they are recording and connected to me with Thunderbolt version 2. The next one on the list, the next slowest on our list, would be USB 3.0. And that's why USB 3.0, we see about 5 gigabits per second as our maximum speed. See folks in the chat room going, oh, I did slowest to fastest. I did it reversed. You gotta read those questions. You're gonna hit them first thing, and you won't even see them. They're just nonsense on the screen. You'll read them 3 times and still not understand what they're telling you. So we've got now Thunderbolt version 2 at 20 gigabits per second, USB 3.0 at 5 gigabits per second, which means SATA Revision 2.0, which operates at 3 gigabits per second, would be the third on our list, leaving IEEE 1394B at 800 megabits per second as the slowest. So if you answered B, A, D, C, you got this one right. Knowing these speeds and feeds are an important part of the exam. These come directly from the 22901 section 1.7 computer interface speeds and distances video. So if you're trying to find this in your study guides, I always have the exam objective number there at the bottom of the answer page, so you'll be able to find this later and figure out where these are. Let's do another question. This one is more of, it's a multiple choice question, but it's a visual one. So if you're listening on the podcast, I apologize. You're not going to be able to get this one understood very well because the question asks, which of these laptop interfaces would be the best choice for connecting an external monitor? And all I'm showing you are 4 different interfaces, an A, a B, a C, and a D. And now it's up to you to know which one of these am I going to connect this external monitor to. This is one that you see and run into all the time. You're going to look into the back of a computer and there's 20 interfaces back there. What are those interfaces? What do they do? What would I connect to them? How would I use these interfaces? And hopefully this is one that you can use to be able to figure out all of those pieces. You have to be able to see these and instantly know what those are. So A, B, C, or D are your options. Obviously, I'm giving you A, B, C, and D on the system here so you can figure these things out. You may be able to figure out based on what you know an interface is that couldn't support an external monitor. That might allow you to do a 50-50, maybe. You can't phone a friend, but you can maybe get rid of a couple of them. It's a calculatus limitatus, and get rid of at least 1, maybe 2 of these to help you out on the exam. Which of these laptop interfaces would be the best choice for connecting an external monitor? So hopefully you're familiar with some of these, and I think some of you are, because I can see that 71% of you have chosen C as the answer. 22% of you chose B in this image, and 6% chose D, but 0% chose A. So the A really didn't go anywhere with folks. So if we look at this picture, we can see C is the one that 70% of you chose. That's the interface right here. We had about 26% of you choose B. So really it's a number 1 and a number 2, and hardly anybody chose A and hardly anyone chose D. So what are these interfaces? Well, let's step through these. A, we can almost tell right there is an RJ45 connector. That must be an Ethernet connector in this view. B, it's difficult to tell unless you look really closely, but that is a FireWire connection. And although FireWire connections are good for transferring data, not so great for external monitors. Hardly used at all these days, and not really used for monitor connections even when they were popular. C is a Thunderbolt connection, and as we already mentioned, and I already mentioned, I plug in my monitor connections with Thunderbolt connections here in the studio, so that's why C is definitely going to be the lead on this answer because D is a USB connection. And USB, we don't connect video with USB. It's not something that we do. It certainly would not be the best choice. And the question was really asking you for the best choice when connecting an external monitor. So hopefully that's something that you've been able to work through and looking at these. I think Thunderbolt really is the right answer here. Thunderbolt is a high-speed connector that can provide both video connectivity and data over the same connection. And you can see the values there for Thunderbolt version 1, version 2, and version 3. Version 3 Thunderbolt, 40 gigabits per second. Plenty of speed. You can really connect devices up over a 3-meter connector. So they have to be close to each other. There are optical versions. You don't see those very often for Thunderbolt, but there is an optical standard for Thunderbolt that allows you to connect devices that are 60 meters apart. So if you're in a data center, perhaps, maybe that's one you can do. And some of you in the chat room are going, yeah, well, there's USB to video solutions. There are FireWire to video solutions. There are things out there that can support those. There absolutely is, but that wasn't the question. The question is which of these laptop interfaces would be the best choice for connecting an external monitor. Heck, you could even plug in your Ethernet connection to a remote desktop for an external monitor. That's not really an external monitor, though, is it? RJ45 is just not a good choice over Ethernet to be able to do something like that. So the best choice on this, clearly, without a doubt, is option C. And in fact, if we look at the folks who answered, 70% of you chose option C. You got that one absolutely right. No question there about that. 22% of you chose question B. Definitely not going to run into a lot of FireWire these days, so not something you should worry about. Let's go to another question. I've got one waiting for you right here. With Vala, a system administrator is configuring new laptops for her mobile sales team members. Which of the following would be the best way to protect the company's data while away from the office? Would it be A, use encrypting file system for user documents? Would it be B, require strong passwords for all user accounts? Would it be C, enable FDE on the laptop drive? Would it be D, require the use of multiple authentication factors? Or would it be E, remove all mobile users from the administrator group? There are plenty of different options there to choose from. Maybe it's one that you've done, but you should definitely consider the question and what's being asked. And the question is, scroll down so we can see a little better. Vala is a system administrator and she's configuring new laptops for her mobile sales team members. Which of the following would be the best way to protect the company's data while away from the office? Would it be A, use encrypting file system for user documents? Would it be B, require strong passwords for all user accounts? Would it be C, enable FDE on the laptop drive? Would it be D, require the use of multiple authentication factors? Or would it be E, remove all mobile users from the administrator group? One of those is going to be the right answer. If you think you know what the answer is, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer this one. I'm going to take a sneak peek while you're doing that and see if I can figure out which ones these would be. This is really a security question. So we're really talking about a 902 question when we're talking about this. And it's one that's a very good question for both A+, and I think it's a good question for Security Plus. That's a perfectly valid Security Plus question if I had to look at it. Security Plus, I don't consider to be more complex of a certification to study for. It's just different types of content. It's one you have to think about. And the question here is very specific about what it's looking for. And there's so many different nuances associated with protecting data. And that's one we really have to think about. Let's see. We've got a number of people. I'm still waiting. I wait for a certain number to come in because you're busy Googling. I realize this. I want to give you plenty of time. Stop Googling. Don't Google it. We're going to pretend we're sitting at the exam. We want to be able to see if this is really what we're doing. And we can see by the answers that 44% have chosen D, require the use of multiple authentication factors. 27% have said use encrypting file system for user documents. 15% said enable FDE on the laptop drive. 9% said require strong passwords for all user accounts. And 6% said remove all mobile users from the administrator group. Let's hope that all users are already not part of the administrator group. That would be great if that was the case. We shouldn't have to remove them from the administrator group. They shouldn't be administrators already. So what would the answer be? The part of the question that's most important is we're trying to determine the best way to protect the company's data while away from the office, and the data is on new laptops. So this is an obvious concern for people. It was an obvious concern for me when I was a field person. I was traveling constantly. I was on a flight. I was in an airport. I was in a train station. I was at a customer site. I was constantly moving. So I wanted to be sure that if this laptop got out of my hands, could somebody gain access to that data? And the only way you can really ensure that's not going to happen is with full disk encryption, FDE. Full disk encryption is where you are encrypting everything on the drive, not just your user files, because quite honestly, a user file directory, who knows where people are putting this information. Full disk encryption takes care of the entire drive, all of the data on the drive. If you didn't have full disk encryption, someone could remove the drive from the laptop if they wanted to and begin looking into the files that are on the system with a third-party system. So that's something you would really want to avoid. The idea is that if you lose the laptop, if it suddenly goes into the airport scanner and it never comes out on the other side, it gets somewhere, it disappeared. It went into the ether that is at the airport. You don't have to worry about it. All your data is safe. You're really just fine. So it doesn't even matter if they have your password. It doesn't matter what's going on your machine. Everything's protected. Your administrators and your company don't have to worry about the data. They simply send you out a new laptop and tell you not to be quite as bad with keeping up with your equipment as you're doing. So that's an important consideration for security. In the Windows world, full disk encryption is done through BitLocker. So if you hear the term BitLocker, you can automatically think, oh, somebody's doing FDE. They're doing full disk encryption. And indeed, FDE was answer C. Only 15% of you chose FDE, but what about the other answers? Why weren't those really the right answers for this question? Let's have a look at those. Let's start with answer D, which 46% of you said require the use of multiple authentication factors, which you absolutely should do, but using multiple authentication factors will not help you protect this company data when the user is away from the office. It will only protect the information going across the network. There's going to be an amazing amount of company data that's on the hard drive that still needs to be protected, and multiple authentication may or may not. In fact, the multiple authentication may not even be used for the VPN. It could be on your local machine. So you get to authenticate with multiple authentication types and all of your data is still not encrypted. That's not very safe at all, is it? So that's definitely not the right answer. If we go to the next most popular would be A, use encrypting file system for user documents. Encrypting file system is a method of encrypting in the operating system that doesn't encrypt the entire drive. You can simply select individual folders or files that you would like to encrypt. But that means other parts of the system are remained in the clear. So if somebody did gain access to that information, to that drive, to the physical drive itself, they could see all of the other documents that are on the system. And if they happen to gain access to your password, well, then they may be able to gain access to those documents as well. The next most popular incorrect answer was B, require strong passwords for all user accounts. Again, strong passwords, very good idea, a very good best practice, but it doesn't protect any of the data that's on the drive itself if the laptop happens to be lost. And the last answer, remove all mobile users from the administrator group. Again, they shouldn't be there to begin with. You should, of course, make sure your mobile users are protected properly and they're not members of groups they should not be a member of. If they are an administrator, they probably still need to be a member of the administrator group. And just by being in the administrator group or not doesn't protect the data that's on the drive. So hopefully this is one where full disk encryption would be really the right answer. In fact, these days, most organizations that have remote users and have any type of concern at all for their company data, which really should be everybody, is going to use full disk encryption of some kind. It's an important technology, especially for mobile devices. That's why on all of our mobile devices, on all of our phones, those are all have full disk encryption on all of our phones. Why wouldn't we do it on our laptops as well? So that would be BitLocker. It would be C enabling FDE on the laptop drive. Well, some of you in the chat room are saying, what in the world are you talking about with FDE? I've never heard of this. What is that? It's one of those acronyms, and there's tons of them on the exam that you have to know. I have taken all the acronyms, all of the important pieces of information on this A+ exam, and I've put them into a set of course notes. Now, you could, of course, and I highly recommend that you also go through and go through some course notes. You create your own notes from this, but a lot of you just don't have the time. There's no way to get all of these notes written. So you might want to have a single point that you can go to where all of these notes are already available to you. And I've got these in the Professor Messer A+ course notes: hardware, networking, laptops, printers, operating systems, security, troubleshooting, command line. It's all in here. Here's what these course notes look like. They're PDF files. The PDF files for the 229.01's 19 pages of information, 24 pages on the 902, and you can see images, pictures, all the graphs, the important text. I put everything in here that you do really need to know before you finally decide to walk in for your exam. It doesn't take the place of your book. It doesn't take the place of your videos. These are notes that you can use for later. I've also got a physical version of these. If you wanted to pay just a little bit more, I'll print them out. I bind them. It's pretty nice. It's actually, I don't do it. The professional printers bind them and print them out because it is beautiful, heavy, nice paper in this. I'm very proud of this, actually. It's an exceptionally high quality book to be able to walk around with. And if you buy the physical book, you get the digital version as well. So you can buy the book online. You immediately can download the digital one, and then I will send you the physical one in the mail, and it just shows up magically at your door. Now you have both of them. So it's just another example of something you can do to help support the site. A lot of you have said, I want to contribute. Well, I don't take contributions to the site. I want to give you something for the money and the time that you spend, and I think this might be a good way to do it. You can find out more about these course notes at professormesser.com/A+CN, or at the top of the website. You will find everything you need to know to be able to find those on the website. So have a look at the course notes, and thank you for your ongoing support with those. It really does go a long way to keep everything going here at Messer Studios. Let's do some more questions. I've got plenty more to go through. And since I started a little bit late, I'm going to go a little bit late on this one too. So we will keep going with these. I'll make sure that you get the content you need. This one's a little bit long, so we're going to go through this one in a lot of detail. The question is long. I like some of these questions on the exam have these paragraphs that you have to read through, and this is a pretty good example of one. So here's the question. You would like to configure your Soho router to automatically allow inbound traffic to a particular application service. This traffic flow should only be allowed when the application is active. When the application is not in use, the router should deny the traffic flow. Which of the following would be the best way to accomplish this? So that's a very specific type of question. Would it be to A, configure NAT? Would it be B, enable port forwarding? Would it be C, configure QoS? Would it be D, disable DHCP? Or would it be E, define a port trigger? So that is a very specific type of scenario, but one that you do run into from time to time, is that you would like to configure your Soho router to automatically allow inbound traffic to a particular application service. This traffic flow should only be allowed when the application is active. When the application is not in use, the router should deny the traffic flow. Which of the following would be the best way to accomplish this? Would it be A, configure NAT, B, enable port forwarding, C, configure QoS, D, disable DHCP, or E, define a port trigger? If you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. This is something that if you think you know the answer to any of these, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go and have a look at the professormesser.com/QA and put your answer in. And then we'll, of course, go through all of these questions and go through all of the details and figuring out what all these technologies are. Now, again, no Googling. If you see a word you don't recognize or something you don't know, make a note of it, certainly, but make a stab at the question. And that's something, by the way, you should do when you're in the exam. If you don't understand a question or you don't understand the answers and there's just no way that you could intelligently answer this question, which is me most of the time, you just have to take a guess. Don't leave any questions blank on the exam. That's an important thing to remember. So make sure that you, of course, always answer every question. Never leave one blank. You aren't penalized for getting questions wrong. They don't take points away from you. The only thing that could happen is you get more points because you answered it right accidentally. So make sure you take advantage of those things when you're working through that, and that you're considering how much time you have left. And maybe if you have a minute left and there's still 10 questions, mark them all as A and go with the odds. Maybe that's what you should do. That's my recommendation anyway. Let's see how you did on this one, though. You'd like to configure your Soho router to automatically allow inbound traffic to a particular application service. Traffic flow should only be allowed when the application is active. And the application not in use, the router should deny the traffic flow. What's the best way to accomplish that? 65% of you said E, define a port trigger. 16% said enable port forwarding, which was B. And then single digits for C, configure QoS, A, configure NAT, and D, disable DHCP. So that's one you do have to think about whenever you're trying to deal with all of these different issues. Now, 64% was a pretty good number. It's certainly a majority and much more than any of the other answers, but was port triggering really the right answer? Yes, it was. Port trigger is nice because it's got that dynamic functionality of only enabling itself when the application is started, and it automatically configures your firewall to not allow the traffic anymore when the application is done. So you see this a lot with applications that are not always on. It might be a game server. It might be a file transfer server. It might be a temporary service. And that dynamic functionality becomes in handy. That way you know, even when this isn't running, you're safe. The firewall is already denying any traffic because it's not running. But as soon as you start that service up, the firewall is going to allow traffic through again. So it's a great way to manage traffic flows and provide the maximum amount of security that you're going to run into with these. It comes in handy to be able to have that functionality, I guess. That's one whenever I start trying to figure out what do I do with all of these. One challenge with this is only really one person can perform the port trigger at one time. So if you got multiple users, you're trying to get multiple levels of communication through, you really can't use a port trigger. You're going to have to use port forwarding to make that happen. So it's some disadvantages to using it, but it does come in handy if it fits your requirements. And indeed, E, the define a port trigger, 63% of you did get that one absolutely right. Port forwarding would not be the case because port forwarding is always on. It doesn't have that dynamic functionality. It doesn't enable itself and then disable itself when needed. So 15% of you, not quite correct on that one. 9% of you said configure QoS. QoS is quality of service. It's a way to configure how much traffic is going to be able to go through your network at any particular time by application. You can set priorities so that real-time traffic may have a priority over a file transfer, for example. 7% said configure network address translation. That's what NAT is. Network address translation is simply a way to modify communication through the network. It doesn't allow or disallow or dynamically allow or disallow any type of traffic. And 4% of you said said disable DHCP. All that would do is the dynamic host configuration protocol would no longer work when you plugged in a device, and devices would not be able to automatically get an IP address, which does nothing with allowing or disallowing applications as they're going through the network, which means E, define a port trigger. 64% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another one. I've got a question here about, well, quickly, by the way, that was the 229.01 section 2.6, and my video is configuring a Soho wireless router. That's where you would find that one in there. The next question, your Windows computer is hanging during the boot process. That's not a good kind of hanging. You'd like to create a log that details the processes during boot. Let me change this so you can answer it online. Which of the following would be the best way to view this log? So your computer is hanging during the boot process. You'd like to create a log that details the processes during boot. Which of the following would be the best way to view this log? Would it be A, enable boot logging in your UEFI BIOS? Would it be B, turn on the boot log in system configuration? Would it be C, view the last boot log in Event Viewer? Would it be D, boot from the original installation media? Or would it be E, enable boot logging in the registry? So your computer's hanging during the boot process. I hate that when that happens. So, and you'd like to create a log that details those processes during boot. What do? How do you make that happen? That's a pretty common troubleshooting issue. And some of you in the chat room says, yep, done that. Run into that one before, as have I. And having that log process during the boot can come in pretty handy. But how do you do that? How does it work? How do you enable it? How do you get that working? Well, if you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can type it in there as well. Let's take a warm beverage break. I've definitely run into this one before. This becomes pretty useful too. So as soon as you learn this little trick, you come back to it over and over again. You've got your little bag of tricks that you can now pull from when you have these types of problems. I have these little applications I like to use. I have these little tools I have in the operating system I like to go to, and this is one of those as well. So hopefully you've run into this one. I have a feeling some of you may not have run into this one before, and I say that because I took a sneak peek at the details here of what we're choosing. We're a little torn on this one. We're really not quite sure. Some we absolutely know can't be the case, but others, we don't know. And that's because I'll show you what I'm seeing. Here we go. We can see that we've got kind of a tie for first, a three-way tie. 41% have said enable boot logging in your UEFI BIOS. 30% of you said view the last boot log in Event Viewer. 25% of you have said turn on the boot log in system configuration. Only 3% of you said enable boot logging in the registry, and only 1% said boot from the original installation media. So the answers went A, C, B, E, D. So we should probably figure out the details of what this happens to be, because we're not quite sure. If we don't have a majority, but if we went with the top number here, it would be enable boot logging in the UEFI BIOS and viewing the last boot log in the Event Viewer and turning on the boot log in system configurations. Probably one of those three to be able to work through that. And if you've ever worked or wanted to work with logs, the place that's the easiest to do this is in system configuration. In fact, I've even highlighted on the screen right here in the system configuration program under the boot tab is a boot log option. And it saves the logs into the Windows directory in the ntbtlog.txt. Not exactly obvious when you're trying to figure out where'd the log go. Very easy to do. You just turn it on. Now, there's other ways to turn on this boot logging. There are other settings that you can configure manually and from the command line. This is the easiest way to do it. You just turn it on in the boot log, and you'll be able to work through this. Very simple to be able to do that. That's whenever I work through those. That does become a significant problem. The logs are available, the place I happen to see it, in the system configuration. It's an easy way to configure these logs up to have them there, and makes it easy. If you're in Linux, by the way, it's helpful to know about Linux because the exam's going to ask you some Linux questions. Same thing for Mac OS. But for setting this up in Windows, which was our question about Windows computer hanging, where can I set up boot log? It would be B, turn on the boot log in system configuration. The 23% of you got that one absolutely correct. You've got the 45% of you that said enable boot logging in your UEFI BIOS. That might help you if your problem was a problem booting the BIOS. But here our Windows computer is getting into the Windows process, and that's where it's hanging. And quite honestly, most UEFI BIOS don't have or may not have a boot logging process. So that's one that you do run into as a bit of a problem. Now, if you are trying to get to a point where and hanging doesn't mean permanent, by the way. People are saying, but how do I turn that on if it's hanging? Hanging means there could be a delay during the boot process, and you finally get it in there. So that's one that does come in handy. Viewing the last boot log in the Event Viewer, that's difficult to do. It doesn't provide a lot of detail, certainly not as much detail as the boot logger that you have there and having all of those pieces there. You want to be able to see that, and the only way you're able to view this information is by turning on the boot log and system configuration. Yeah, the question was, which is the best way to view the log? And the only way you can view this log is by turning it on the system config. Booting from the original installation media is not going to provide you with a boot log, and enable boot logging in the registry, a little bit more difficult to configure and set that part up. But the question was, which would be the best way? And the best way, and given the answers that we have available, turning on the boot log and system config is really the best way to have those things there. There are so many different questions you may run into on the exam. This one comes from the 22902 section 4.1 operating system troubleshooting tools. Now, one of the things that I have done is I've written a ton of questions through the years and hundreds more just for a set of books I created called my Pop Quiz Collection. I have a Pop Quiz Collection for the 22901. I have a Pop Quiz Collection for the 22902. And this Pop Quiz Collection will step you through hundreds and hundreds. I guess if you bought both books, you'd have 1,300 questions, over 1,000 questions, multiple choice, performance-based questions, test tips are in there. They're all in a digital PDF that I have available. And the reason it's digital is because I have links in here. It's kind of hard to see in this view I've got on the screen. So let's take one of these questions that's here, which is 1.3. Which of these would be a common function from the computer management console? Would it be restore the master boot record, change the local user's password, modify the BIOS device boot sequence, add a Windows firewall rule, or update the Windows operating system file? And you can decide which one you'd like, and then you can click jump to answer, and it tells you, oh, it's B, change a local user's password. Then I put a description here that says why that particular answer is correct. And then there is a link to the video that can then explain more about this particular question. Or I can simply choose to go to the next question, which would be 1.4, which puts right at the top of the screen. And it says, when working with Windows disk management, you see one of your disks is identified as resyncing. What's the most likely reason? You can choose the answer. When you jump to the answer, you only see this answer. This is what I wanted to do with this particular book. You aren't spoiled with the next answer. It doesn't give you the next answer anywhere on the screen. In fact, there's an entire page here. You would have to flip the page. That's why this is an all digital book. And so you aren't spoiled with the next question. And when you click next question, it takes you to the next question on the screen. You don't even have to do very much to find the next question. We're at the bottom of the page here. We'll jump to the answer, go to the next question, and we start at 1.6. So that's one that is available. I have a 901 version, a 902 version, 700 questions in the 901, 600 questions in the 902, $15 for these. You can download it immediately. They're all available. There's performance-based questions in here. So plenty that you can go through, just a nice, huge amount. I've separated it out, fortunately, by the domains. So if you wanted to study domain 3, you can start in the 3rd chapter there that has the domain 3. So you've got some options available. Another way to help support the site. Find out more about this, professormesser.com/PQC. So let's see what we can do with keeping poor YouTube up and running by going through some more questions. I think that would be the way to do it right now. Let's do exactly that. This next question, this is a visual question for you folks on the chat room. Oh, but looks like I don't have the visual question in my list, do I? Oh, that's sad. That makes me very sad that I don't have this here. On which of these display types would it? In fact, I don't even have this. We're going to skip this question. So there's a bonus for you. You can work this one out because I'm looking at my questions on my screen, and that's not one of them to have this here. Let's mess around with some others on this live. You can tell it's a live stream already, can't you? To have this here. Let's see if I even have the rest of these. Okay, I do. So here's a question we can all do. If you're following along online, you've seen a new question pop open, and this will be a good one that we can do that finally I've synced everything up on my screen. The question is that an insurance company is concerned about power spikes and noise on the power outlet at each desk in their building. Which of the following would address these issues? Would it be A, use laptops with battery power during the workday? Would it be B, install a surge suppressor at each desk? Would it be C, use auto-switching power supplies for all desktop computers? Or would it be D, install a UPS for the entire building? Which would be the best way to address, or as the question is, which of the following would address these issues? There's your question. So an insurance company is concerned about power spikes and noise on the power outlet at each desk in their building. Which of the following would address these issues? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can, of course, answer this question. Don't answer in the chat room. You want to absolutely step through these answers. I think some of these, I think most people might even be familiar with this technology and what would make sense. Some of you in the chat room, you're sure you got it right. Fernando is sure he got it right. So we're going to find out if that's really the case. I bet he did. I think a number of you did on this one. This is one that you do have to find the right answer for these, the right solution. I wouldn't say the right answer, but the right solution for a problem like this. How do you figure out which one of these it's going to be? You have to go through each one of these to kind of break them down into what's the right fit for what we're trying to accomplish. Let's see how we did with this question. It was an insurance company is concerned about power spikes and noise on the power outlet at each desk in their building. Which of the following would address these issues? We can see that 62% of you said install a surge suppressor at each desk. 27% of you said install a UPS for the entire building. 10% of you said use an auto-switching power supply for all desktop computers. And only 1% said use laptops with battery power during the workday. Well, the question here was very specific. It was asking about power spikes and noise on the power outlet. That's the only thing it was asking for. It wasn't asking you to do anything else with power other than address the problems with power spikes and noise. And the easiest way to make that happen, everyone should be using these anyway. If they're not, you should get those for everybody's desk, is a surge suppressor. That's because not all power coming through that power line is going to be what they call clean power. There's going to be spikes. There's going to be noise. There's all kinds of things that happen in these power lines. People run into a power pole and snap the line. There's storms that hit the power lines. You want to be sure if there's any type of spike that you're able to divert any of that to ground. It becomes pretty important to be able to do that. So make sure that you understand what these differences are between these devices. This also has some nice filtering in it. It will get rid of those spikes. It will even everything out. It will get rid of the noise and make it very, very simple. You can see this comes from the 22902 section 5.2, managing your computing environment. So let's look at the other answers on here and see, well, does the other answers, was that really what we should have done? Because if we look and 62% of you that said install a surge suppressor at each desk, you were spot on. That is the right answer. The D, install a UPS for the entire building. Well, that would be at least tens of thousands of dollars to install that particular device. And although it would, generally speaking, take care of power spikes and noise, it also does a whole lot more. When you have UPS, uninterruptible power supply, that means that if you do lose power to the building, all your systems in the building remain running for the entire building. It's not something very easy to configure and set up for an entire building. And it doesn't focus on the needs in this particular question. You've gone way outside the scope of this particular question. In fact, you might as well say use laptops with battery power during the workday. It effectively performs the same function because you don't have to worry about the power. You've now got all of the power coming from your local battery source. And that's why both A and D would not be the correct answer. C, 10% of you said use an auto-switching power supply for all desktop computers. And an auto-switching power supply doesn't do anything to filter noise. It doesn't do anything to filter spikes. An auto-switching power supply is one that you can connect to an 110-volt power system or a 220-volt power system, and it will automatically figure out the voltage on the power line and automatically switch to use the right type of input voltage on that power supply. That's the auto switching. If it's not an auto switching power supply, there's actually a switch on the back of it. You have to make sure that you put it on the right kind of voltage depending on what you're plugging into. You don't want to plug a 220 volt line into a 110 power supply. That's a very quick way to get rid of a power supply. But auto switching, you don't have to worry about it. A lot of our laptops have auto switching bricks, those power supplies on the outside of the laptop. If you look at them, they have both 110 and 220 volt. They say both of them on. That's how you know, oh, that's auto switching, because obviously there's not a switch on those little bricks to have these here. We've come to the top of the hour, but since we had so many things going on today, and yes, we're still live, who would have thunk, let's do another one. Now, the real question is, do I have the right questions on my side? And I do. So I have another question for you. We're going to keep this going. Here is your question. A network administrator is troubleshooting a network communications issue and needs to build a traffic map between two devices. Which of the following would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be A, netstat? Would it be B, map? Would it be C, traceRT? Would it be D, protocol analyzer? One of those would be the best choice for this requirement. So this is where we need to figure out what type of tools are going to work best for the job that we have ahead of us. Network administrators troubleshooting a network communications issue needs to build a traffic map between two devices. Which of the following would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be A, netstat, B, map, C, traceroute, D, protocol analyzer? We got two of them, three of them, four possible answers to choose from. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA to have that work. This is a pretty good one, because networking is an important part of the 22901 exam. You need to know about all these networking tools. You need to know command line functions. You need to know not only what these command lines are, but you need to know what the different options are. Oh, there are 5 options here. My apologies. Ping is E. E is ping. So you got netstat, map, traceroute, protocol analyzer, and ping. Which one is going to be the right one in this particular scenario? I might have hidden the one that everybody needed to choose. It could have been awful. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you will certainly be able to do that. Yeah, the last one didn't have an E. That's why. We didn't forget on that one. It simply did not have one. They don't always have an E. It depends on how creative I'm being whenever we work through those. Sometimes I'm very creative, sometimes not creative at all. Just depends on what you run into and what the different options might be. Well, if we look at what you folks thought the answer would be, here it is. We've got traceroute got 72% of the answers. But is that really the right answer? Because 13% of you said netstat. Of course, we would use netstat to build a traffic map. 6% of you said map, and 6% of you said protocol analyzer. Kind of a tie for third. And fourth place was ping at 3%, probably because I didn't give it enough credit there at the very beginning. People were like, why should I choose ping? It seemed to be left out. But in fact, the answer wasn't ping. The answer was traceroute. And that's the best way if you're going to figure out how many hops does it take to get between point A and point B, and what routers are we going through. And we can build a map with traceroute, traceRT in Windows, and traceroute if you're in Linux or Mac OS. And you can see exactly how long it takes to get from point A to point B. It uses a protocol called ICMP. And ICMP is one that does allow you to do a number of different things. And the thing we're taking advantage of with traceroute is a time to live exceeded. We're sending a special packet out that has a time to live of 1. And when it hits the first router, the time to live goes to 0. And a router, whenever it says that anything has a time to live of 0, it sends back a message saying, my time to live 0. Sorry, I couldn't send this any farther. And so we take that information and go, oh, that must be the first hop. Now let's set time to live to 2. It goes to the first router, which decreases it by 1. Now time to live is 1. It goes to the next router. That router decreases it by 1. The time to live goes to 0. The router says, I can't send this any longer. Let me send a message back to you saying, sorry, time to live was exceeded. Oh, that must be our second router. And on and on and on. We keep doing it until we finally get to our end device. And we got to finally get a response back from the end device so we know we hit the end of the line and we're able to see all of the routes in between. Now, ICMP isn't something that is always available. Sometimes it's filtered when you start going through these networks. Some routers won't respond with a time to live exceeded. They've been specially configured not to do that. Sometimes there's a firewall that filters all the ICMP so the router never even gets it when you have that particular issue associated with it. When it's coming back to you, it gets filtered out. And that's why it's not always something that works, but most of the time it comes in pretty handy. So that's why trace route if you chose C is absolutely the right answer. 72% of you were spot on with that one. It would not be netstat. Netstat's a very useful utility to use on a local machine to see all of the different traffic flows that have been established and traffic flows or devices or services that may be waiting for a connection. You can see the outbound traffic and the inbound traffic and see what applications are using that. But it doesn't build a map. It doesn't tell you all of the different hops between point A and point B. It's really useful to seeing what's happening on a local machine. Map is a command you don't see much anymore. It's an old Novell command to map a drive. We don't use that much anymore. Protocol analyzers are used to be able to see traffic that happens to be traversing a single point in a network, but it doesn't give us a lot of insight into where the traffic came from all of the different hops that it took to get to us. There used to be a way to do that when we did source routing, but now we don't do source routing anymore. We simply send the packet to a router, and the router only knows what it's connected to, and it sends it to the next router. It's like stopping at every convenience store, asking for directions every spot along the way. That's how we route today. It's amazing it works all, isn't it? And ping is useful to determine if a device is on the network and communicating. It's not always reliable, but it can be a very useful tool to see if a device is up and running. So the folks that choose C, trace route, 73% of you got that one. Absolutely right. This one, by the way, came from 4.4 on the 901 exam, which was network troubleshooting at the command line. So that's another good one to have to work through. Now, we went a little bit, we started late and we had such problems. Let's do another question. We'll do our last question of the day. Let's make sure that I'm able to see this question. I am, and here it is. Sam, a system administrator, has been asked to troubleshoot a Windows 7 desktop. She would like to know which version of Windows 7 is running and how much memory is installed in the computer. Which of the following would be the best way to obtain this information? Would it be A, MSInfo32? Would it be B, services? Would it be C, sysinfo? Would it be D, MSTSC? Or would it be E, regedit? So Sam is a system administrator. She's been asked to troubleshoot a Windows 7 desktop. She'd like to know which version of Windows 7 is running, how much memory is installed in the system. These are pretty important things to know about. So which of the following would be the best way to obtain this information? Would it be A, MSInfo32? Would it be B, services? Would it be C, sysinfo? Would it be D, MSTSC? Or would it be E, regedit? Maybe you've done this before. I've done this before because you sit down at a new machine. You've never sat down at that machine before. You know nothing about the internals of this device. You might not even be able to see the machine. It may be under the desk. You don't even know what it is. And you just want to know what's on the system. What is it running? You ask the user, what operating system is on here? And they say, Chrome. It's not an operating system. I tell you what, how much memory's in here? 40 gig, 120 terabytes. I don't know. It's a USB key. No, that's not memory. So I need to know how much memory's in here to troubleshoot. I tell you what, we'll run this little thing I got here. It's part of the operating system. It will tell me how much memory's in here. It'll tell me what version of Windows this one's running. It'll tell me a lot more. It's a fantastic utility. You'll love it running through those. So maybe you will be able to see those details. Sam's she's a busy gal. She's got a lot going on. She doesn't have time to try to figure it out. She needs to find exactly the information she needs so she can keep things going and get back to the NACWDA lab. So if you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Let's see how we did. Oh, we are torn. We have two options here that we just don't know about. We've got MSInfo32. 47% of you chose A, MSInfo32. 49% of you chose sysinfo, option C. So what would this be in a Windows 7 to be able to deal with all of these problems? And notice 2% said regedit, 2% said MSTSC, 1% said services. All of these things, by the way, are legitimate programs to use. All of these can be used. So you've got some options anyway when working through these systems and being able to figure out the details. I should say almost all of these are legitimate because one of these is not so legitimate. It was a red herring that was thrown in here, because the right answer that Sam should use is MS-Info 32. This is the Windows system information utility. This has a ton of information in it. This has everything in it, by the way. Everything. When I say a wealth of knowledge, you don't have to ask anybody anything, because it will tell you which version of the operating system is running. It tells you BIOS information. It tells you IRQs and memory and drives and partitions. And it's all in here. Everything about multimedia, networking, and display details, everything. It's a fantastic little utility. It gives you driver information. You can see print jobs are listed in here, all the running tasks in here. We don't use it enough, really. It's a great little utility, MS-Info 32. That's the one you want to choose. And indeed, folks in the chat room are saying, oh, well, yes, because sysinfo, although it's a fantastically named option, doesn't actually exist in Windows 7. It's not a thing. There are many third-party programs you can get for Windows and Linux that are called sysinfo, but there's no sysinfo in Windows. You can't use that sysinfo utility because the sysinfo doesn't work so well to have that there. MS-Info 32 is pretty useful to have those there. And MS-Info 32, if you aren't using it, start using it, because it's a great little utility. It can, whenever somebody's just not sure, you won't even have to ask anybody, really. Just sit down and run MS-Info 32. Look, I almost said sysinfo. Sit down and run sysinfo, and then realize you've typed the wrong thing, and then run MS-Info 32. So that's what you should do, is do those. The MS-Info 32, a good option also for running and finding information out about the BIOS. Do we even have it here? Let's see if the BIOS details. Yeah, there it is. So this one has a Phoenix BIOS in it. It's version 2.4. So even if you didn't even know what version of the BIOS was running on this machine and you didn't want to reboot, the user's got 100 Windows up, didn't want to reboot the machine, that's one way you could do it, is run MS-Info 32. And in fact, 47% of you got it. 47% got it absolutely right. So well done with that. Now, a lot of you are trying to figure out, where did all this stuff come from? People in the chat room are going, is that in the part of the test? Is it? One way you can tell is to go directly to the CompTIA A+ certification exam objectives. You can go to professormesser.com/objectives, or just go to the Google machine and go to CompTIA exam objectives. Take you right to the page. Download these. This is your checklist. That tells you everything you need to know about the A+ exam. If you know everything that's listed in here, you understand its context, you understand how it is used, you're going to do just fine on your exam. So make sure that before you do any studying, this should be what you download. Before you go into the testing center, before you schedule your exam, you should use this as a checklist and go through every single thing. If there's something you don't recognize, that's your chance to study up, because you may get a question about it on the exam. No other manufacturer or certification company does this. This is a very unique piece of information to have. You should take advantage of this. Cisco doesn't do this. Microsoft doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Nobody does this. So this is a huge advantage for people that are ready to take this exam. Make sure you take advantage of this. I can't say it strongly enough. So make sure you grab that. CompTIA exam objectives. Go Google that. You'll be just fine. This is finally the end of the study group. We went a little long because of all the problems we had. I apologize for that, but sometimes you don't have control over what happens with the third party. We just kind of roll with it. But we do one of these every month. And of course, we have tons of replays you can go back and view every month as well. If you'd like more information on the study group, you can always go to the calendar on the website, professormesser.com/calendar. And if this is before August the 1st of 2018 that you're watching this replay, then we have one happening on the 1st of August. We're really hitting the 1st of August. So it's not even a month later. It's really 4 weeks later we're doing a study group. I've got really 3 weeks. If you count it out, I've got network plus next week, security plus the week after that, and then we're right back to do an A+ the week after that. So the next one we're having is only in 3 weeks. I'm going to adjust to the new fall time frame. So it's one of those things that we'll be able to work through whenever we've got all of these. So make sure you have a look at the study groups. You know when the next one's going to be. And if you don't know, you can always go to the study group calendars at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, stick around for the next hour. We've got call-in lines I'm going to open up. I've got, I'll take any questions. I'll take them from the chat room. We'll talk about whatever you'd like. Don't forget about the daily pop quiz available for A+ on Twitter. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter and on YouTube. Your subscription to the YouTube channel is enormously important. Thank you so much for the folks that are supporting that already. You can find out how to subscribe, hit the button, smash the button, do whatever the kids say you're supposed to do to get the subscriptions with the bell and the thing at professormesser.com/YouTube. Oh, somebody said, after all of that, I didn't give a CEU word in the first hour. Well, of course, if you want to earn a CEU from this, you can do that by going to the top or bottom of the Professor Messer website. You have to follow this process. Go to the top or the bottom of the website. There's a Contact Us link. In that link, put your name, put your email address, and it will ask you to put a message in there. Somewhere say that it's the July 2018 study group. That helps me find these later. And you want to put a special code word somewhere in there so that I know you watch this study group. And this month's special code word is MSInfo32. That's your special code word of the month. Send that to me. It takes me a week or so, sometimes two, to turn these around and get it back to you. I send you an email that certifies that you must have watched this because you knew the secret code word was MSInfo32. So there you go. I have snuck it in there. Thank you for the reminder, Geek in the chat room, for telling me I completely missed that one. Thank you. There's also my pop quiz collections. Don't forget about those, and your support of those is most appreciated. You can find those at professormesser.com/PQC. Of course, we've got one of these every month. Next week is Network Plus. You're welcome to join us for that. The week after that, Security Plus. You're welcome to join us for that. If you have to leave us now, I can understand that, but you may want to stick around for the next hour. But I will be here in either case. I want to thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay. Well, the link for the stream is remarkably still up and running. I don't know what happened there. But that's the way it goes sometimes. You just never know what you're going to get. Let's see if it's been complaining. I haven't been looking at the status messages. In fact, the status messages here on YouTube screen, let's see what it is having problems today. You can see that it's having some issues. It had some issues 10 minutes ago. It's since 1:08 my time, which is 8 minutes ago. It says it's fine. So you never know. I did notice today when going into YouTube that it was having some errors that popped up when you went in just in the website. So it could be that there are problems there today. In either case, I'm going to be making some adjustments on my side, try to optimize things. Oh, did the stream just lag? It's hard to tell, though, whether it's lagging on my side or lagging on your side. In any case, if we do have a problem with the replay, I will be editing the replay and we'll make sure that it is a complete and full replay by the time you get this to have those things there. So let's get the phone lines up and running so that you're able to get them on the screen too. And look at that. I do not have my phone line information up on the screen because I hit a button. That's what always causes the problems with these systems, by the way, is when you hit a button. For those of you wondering, is it why do we keep hitting buttons? That really is a good question, and I couldn't tell you why we keep doing that. I am challenged every day to figure out those pieces. The phone lines, though, I apparently don't have them here. That's a shame. We'll have to figure out more details with this. Let's get our phone lines up and running, though, so you can at least call in. The phone lines are available at professormesser.com/live, and I will tell you all about them in just a moment as soon as I get the phone lines up and running. I have to click a few things on my side to make that happen, but we'll make that happen right now. I'm calling into my side. I'll give you the phone number, and you're welcome to call into your side as well. Let me host a show on my side. It's all done in the cloud. It's like magic. So I will now call into the cloud, and we will see if I can make that happen. Let's see. There is my call in. Let's call this. I call this thing. Oh, it's going to be loud. Oh, sorry about that. So it's going to say,
Thank you for calling.
well, you're welcome. And then I type something in my screen here, which is right there. And then I hit £, and it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN.
All right. And then I do that. I type these, and it says, hopefully, do you say welcome?
Host.
Oh, well, yeah. Oh, geez. I am in the host room, and I can manage my calls.
Show recording.
Okay, if you would like to call in, we have numbers available for you. You can call in anywhere in the continental United States. Unfortunately, I do not have anything on my screen I can show you, but you can find the number at professormesser.com/live, or you can actually write this down. The call-in line available. Where is my 800 number? Is it on the screen here? Oh, that's not good that I don't show an 800 number anymore. We may have, oh, there it is. Finally found it. So you call us also, 855-785-RJ45. You can also, that number, 855-785-7545. If you're calling on Skype, since it's a toll-free number, it doesn't cost you anything. So you can put a +1 at the beginning to talk to me, and you can go to +1 855-785-7545. So folks in the chat room, let's get some of those questions. One of the first questions, any advice on how to memorize all of these tables of information that are asked on here? Well, it's a good question, of course, because there's tons of content that you are asked about with port numbers, sockets, network speeds, network ports, port numbers, interfaces, speeds are probably the most important because the exam objectives are very specific on what you need to know. They will tell you need to know the speeds of these interfaces. They're just very direct about that. For things like memory modules and CPUs, they say you need to be able to recognize these. So it's very different. A lot of people get into the weeds on, they spend a lot of time memorizing the number of pins in memory. But it doesn't say that you need to know that. It says that you need to recognize them. So I, of course, tell you one way you can recognize them is this is how big it is. Here's how many pins are on it. Here's how, compared to these other pieces of technology, these other memory modules, here's the size of it. Those things are pretty important to know about. So don't worry so much about the things that are not being asked of you. But when it does say things like you need to know the speeds of these interfaces, you need to know the speeds of these interfaces. Part of what we do whenever as technologists is we almost become way too accustomed to this. We know what the speeds of these interfaces is. We don't have a problem with understanding what the speeds are because we work with it for so long. We're already familiar with it. We've already been working with these technologies forever. So it's not a big deal for us to work with the technology. We already know what the speeds of these are because it's so familiar to us. So you may find that issue as well if you've never worked with these technologies before. Oh, this is a little more of a challenge. We really haven't worked with these technologies enough. So that may be something that you need to work on more. You're just not familiar with it enough. So feel free to spend some time with these and being more familiar with what they are. That may be the way to help as well with all of these. I'm going to try to find our number for call in. One moment. I've got another question from the chat room. The question is, I've seen some people saying there are cloud questions on their 901 exam. For shame on them for violating the terms of their candidate agreement. Can't be helped sometimes. People will just say things. Would your 902 video on the subject be enough to answer the questions? Don't worry about things on an exam that aren't listed in the exam objectives. I know other people are saying there's these things that we're seeing on the exam. Don't worry about it. If you spent all of your time studying things that were outside the scope of the exam objectives, you would have no time to study what was actually on the exam. If you study what's listed in the exam objectives, you're going to be fine on the exam. If you really do know all that content, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about memorizing things that are not part of the exam objectives. We don't even know if those particular topics are for a grade or not. And quite honestly, speculating about things that aren't listed there, we just don't know. Now, you don't know. Some people are saying, well, those don't count. We don't know. We don't know. CompTIA doesn't share their grading with this. But I will tell you that if you know everything that's listed in the 220-901 exam objectives, when you sit down for the 220-901 exam, you're going to do fine, because 99% of that exam comes directly off of those sheets of paper. So that's the real key for you, is don't spend time going outside the scope. You're going to do fine. Now, there are things also people are saying, but on the test explanation of what's on the test, they say that there might be questions that aren't covered in the exam objectives. That's true. But the exam objectives also say we reserve the right to ask you anything, even things that aren't listed in the exam objectives. So you just don't know. There's no possible way for any of us to know. I think maybe somebody may have clicked the wrong button and stuck the wrong thing on the wrong exam. I don't know. But CompTIA isn't going to tell us. They don't share that information about anything that they do. So my recommendation for you is don't worry about it. Stop studying things that aren't the exam objectives. Focus on what's there, and you're going to do fine. That's my recommendation. For better or for worse. So let's back to the questions we have here. Also, the phone lines, well, I show them open. Let's make sure. I'm going to refresh my screen that everything's working properly there, and you can also call in on the phone lines if you'd like, or not. We're doing fine with questions in the chat room too, so feel free to put the questions there as well. One of the questions in the chat room is, what is the real-life use of the OSI model? Well, first, that is well outside the scope of the A+ exam, so let's assume that you're someone who's studying for the Network Plus exam or the Security Plus exam. So this person says they've had a challenge memorizing the layout. No network admin I know actually uses it. I don't believe you're talking to network admins. I guarantee you're not talking to network administrators, because in the world of networking and security, we use it constantly. Although these network administrators say they do it by describing, after they're done troubleshooting, the problem was a layer 2 issue. Well, they use it. That's a really good example of someone using the OSI model. We use it to have a common language we can communicate across very diverse technologies. I used to work as a network administrator. I worked as as a systems engineer for a protocol analysis company. I worked as a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company. And we use the OSI model constantly. Because it's a way to explain to people what's happening. Oh, we're going to set up an IPsec tunnel. It's going to encrypt all of your layer 3 data. Layer 2 data is still going to be available unless we do these things. Or somebody says, well, this particular rule in the firewall, where is it making the decision on whether to allow or disallow that traffic? Well, it's making that decision at layer 7. Okay. Now I understand exactly how this device is working related to the data that we're having there. It is used constantly. So make sure that you're familiar with it, but it's not something that is this very specific, detailed, to the letter kind of conversation. It's a broad brush that we use to describe what's happening on the network. Nobody ever sits around and says, I don't think that's layer 3. I think that's layer 2. No, that's layer 2. It's not layer 3. We don't. It's not what it's for. It's not for us trying to fight with each other over what happens to be in a layer or not in a layer. It's a way that we can at least communicate a concept of what we're seeing. And somebody saying, oh, we found the problem was a layer 2 issue, tells you actually a lot about the problem they ran into. You knew it wasn't an IP addressing problem. You knew it wasn't a problem with a server or an application or a service running on a server. We know it wasn't related to a layer 7 firewall rule. So there's a ton of things we already knew about this. So now that it's at layer 2, we knew it was related to a DCE DT connection over a WAN. We know that it was a MAC address type of problem. It was relating to switching. So we already in our minds know exactly what that was simply by somebody saying it was a layer 2 issue. That's a pretty good use of the model. That's an exceptional use of the model. So to dismiss that is remarkable. I have had people send me messages and say, nobody uses this anymore, except I would go from customer to customer. I go to 4 customers in a day, and that's all we talked about, because we had to have, here's a product you've never seen before. How does that work? Well, let me tell you, it looks at layer 2 and does this. It operates at layer 3 if you configure it this way. It looks at layer 7 if you do this. And most of the time, you're talking layer 2, sometimes layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, and layer 7. Sometimes layer 4 on an old firewall maybe. But that's, we all know when we say that what we're talking about. Oh, layer 4 must be a port number. Oh, layer 1, you got a bad cable. So it's almost, it is kind of dismissive to say it that way, but that's valuable details. It's valuable intel whenever you're trying to figure out those details. So make sure you know about the OSI model. It becomes really handy. The one that always gets me is they always explain the TCP/IP model. The TCP/IP model is a much more modern model, they say. It's a model that is a much better way to explain what's going on. Yeah, we don't use it. That is one we never talk about. Nobody ever describes models, layers with the TCP/IP model, because the OSI model is just so good at doing it. That's why. Nobody ever says, oh, it's a layer 3. Well, which layer 3 you're talking? Which layer 4 do you mean? Oh, that's a difficult question. You're never talking about the TCP/IP model, but we keep teaching it. I don't know why. It's completely unused. It has no practical purpose whatsoever, other than to give you another idea of what a model might look like. But I got to tell you, there's tons of models out there for networking, for applications, for protocols, for so many different things. Just don't get wrapped around the axle with the OSI model. If you're taking Network Plus and you're trying to figure out these things and you just can't figure it out, skip it. There are, in fact, I'll bring up my spreadsheet and I'll make this point really quick, because I have a spreadsheet for Network Plus for the 501 exam, which is the latest, where I counted every single topic on the exam, because this is what I do. I do videos and I have all these topics and I compare the two, and I've been doing this for a long time now. The 501 exam has 758 topics on it, on this whole exam. 758. One of those is on the OSI model. Actually, it's probably 7, because the way I count of these topics is each bullet. 7 of them is the OSI model. That leaves you 751 other things to learn. So if you're wondering, some people will get the exam and say, I studied OSI. I didn't even get one question. Well, I know there's 758 topics on the exam. They can't ask you everything. So don't worry about the details. It's the same answer I give, at least as far as the Network Plus exam is concerned, is a lot of people say, I spent days trying to learn how to subnet and I'm just not getting it. What can you tell me? And I tell people that are in that position, skip it. What are you doing? You spent days on this, skip it. Because there are 758 topics to know for Network Plus, and that might be 5 of them. You might not even get a question about subnetting. Well, if that's going to be the case, then you might get one question. You might get 2 questions about subnetting. Even if you got them both wrong, if you knew everything else, you're going to pass your exam. So don't get wrapped around the axle. Don't start spending so much time on these things that you just can't figure out where all this stuff is coming from. So don't worry about the details. We will absolutely make it up by taking all the time you would have been spent wrapped around the axle and see if you can't spend that time learning something else. And I think that's a much better way to go about working with this. Let's see if I can figure out, where's my V1? Where is my V? Oh, see, that's the wrong thing. I'm trying to punch some things on my screen now, and all I'm doing is creating problems for everybody. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get the details up for the phone line so they'll be on your screen. You can also find the phone line information at professormesser.com/live. Let's put me up on the screen with some graphics. Where's graphics 2? Is this 2? That's 1. Well, I will figure out what's going on in my world after we finish this live stream today. Let's go back to I got some other questions in my email today. They don't specifically talk to the A+ exam, but I will find these because there were some very good questions coming through. There's another good one that came into the chat room just now, and I'll come back to that as well. So questions. This one actually was about the A+ exam for those of you working through it. Okay. This one talked about not really A+ exam, but somebody who was working through starting a career in IT. And I get these questions in my inbox all the time, is that I've gone through the A+ certification, I've gotten the certification, I've put out my feelers to companies and I haven't heard anything. You know, how do I start the process of this career in IT? Because it's not easy to get your foot in the door. And quite honestly, once you get your foot in the door, it's so much easier in IT to now move around, move up, move over, do different things. It's that first job that always tends to be the most challenging to run into. So one of the things I always recommend to people is you have to have a healthy resume. But it's so hard to have a healthy resume if you don't have any practical experience. So there's some things you can do that are very good investments in your time and very good investments in your future if you simply follow a couple of things. First, it would be good to have a formal education. So if you have a formal degree, and it doesn't have to be a technology degree. My degree is in business management. And then my first job was installing hard drives and memory boards and bringing systems up to spec and delivering printer cables. Whatever they wanted, I was doing it. But that had nothing to do with business management. That's okay, because you have a formal degree, and that helps with your resume. Having certifications helps with your resume. Certifications don't replace a formal degree. A formal degree doesn't replace certifications. All of these things help in different ways. Some people will say, well, experience is the best thing. That tops everything. Not necessarily. Some people who are hiring want people that don't have experience because they can hire you at less money and then they will train you as you go. It's part of their strategy. So actually having experience sometimes is not the best thing, but having these other things can help. But what if you have never worked a technology job? You don't really have a formal education, or you're working towards your formal education. Maybe you got a certification. What do you do? Well, there's some things you can do that are absolutely free that can really help you during the interview. One of them is to become familiar with your local user groups. And I've mentioned this before in the study groups, is the local user groups can be incredibly helpful to meet people. The people networking part, the part that we sometimes don't consider enough. I was lucky enough in my last job that for my last few jobs that for over 10 years, I would just travel around the country, in some cases the world, and meet people. I go have meetings with them. We discuss technology. How much do you want to buy? Here you go. That's what I did. And it was fun. You got to meet people, but I got to meet people. I got to get on LinkedIn. I got to follow them. I got to meet them again later on. I got to see them at a trade show. Those types of things become useful. And I know whenever I'm hiring, I know somebody who might be good for this. Or if I'm looking for a job, I can ask them what they're doing. One way you can meet people is to go to a local user group meeting, Microsoft user group, Cisco user group, VMware user group. These are not user groups that are available everywhere, but a quick Google search should be able to tell you of a technology user group that might be in your area. It might be a .NET user group, more on the programming side of Microsoft, but it'd be a chance to meet people that are doing this type of work. And more importantly, these are people who already have jobs working with technology in the local places where people have technology jobs. So it might be a state. If you're in state government area, it might be working for the state. If you're in a large area with transportation companies, maybe that's who you're working for. Maybe it's just a huge metropolitan area you're working in, and there's tons of different verticals you may be interested in working with. Those people already work there. And it's a good time to meet them. Oh, where do you work? No kidding. What do you do? That's incredible. I'm working on my A+ certification. I already got my A+. I'm working on a formal education. I just got my degree in. I'm looking for a job in. If I was somebody who wanted to start working as an entry-level technologist in your company, what would you recommend I do? They'll be glad to tell you. That's a pretty valuable piece of information. More importantly, you've met them. Oh, do you have a card? Can I just add you? Can I add you? Send me over your info. Can I add you on LinkedIn? Keep me in mind. It's remarkable how those relationships work. Throughout my career, I think I've had 14 or 15 different jobs. Some of them at the same company. I simply moved from job to job within the same company, but it was about 12 to 15 jobs in my career. I think this might be the last one, but 12 to 15 is pretty good. Different companies, different organizations, different jobs within the same organization. The first job I got, I didn't know anybody there. I still don't know why they hired me. Maybe I was the only one willing to do it. It was South Florida. It was, like I said, installing hard drives, memory modules, and cards, and delivering printer cables that were forgotten in the original shipment. I was the guy, here, take this printer cable 30 miles that way. Okay, off I go. Grunt work. But I met people at the places where I would work. I got familiar with the technology that I was working with, and that helped me get the next job, because the next job was working for an insurance company that I happened to visit all the time to deliver their printer cables, install their hard drives, install their memory. And I knew what technology they were buying. I understood the technology they were working with. They had a help desk. And I said, you guys are working in a really nice place. I'm running around South Florida all day in the heat. I'll put on a tie and just hang out with you guys if you have a position. They said, yeah, we have a position. We'll hire you. Because I knew them and they knew me. And so every job after that, I knew people who worked there. It may not have even been people who worked in the same group. It certainly wasn't always people who were hiring managers, but I could say in the interview, oh yes, I know this person and they work in this place. And I see them all the time at the user group meeting. And people like to hire people they know. That's a very valuable piece of information to have. Secondly, you should do as much work in your lab as you can. Do you have an old computer? Have you installed Linux on it? Have you set up a web server on it? Have you done any web programming and got WordPress running on it? Do you have an old Windows machine? Have you taken it apart? Have you put it back together? Have you upgraded the memory? Have you upgraded the hard drive? Have you upgraded the SSD? Have you taken that system and configure Windows on it? Set up Windows to have a service to be able to provide printing. Do the things that you see in the A+ exam, but set it up as a print server. Have somebody else on your network print to that printer through your computer. Not something we usually do at home, but there's a great way to become familiar with the internals of the operating system. Grab some different utilities. Is it Process Monitor? Am I thinking of the right one? Let's find out from sysinternals, which is now Microsoft, that has been a Microsoft organization. One thing you can do to really understand what's going on under the surface of Windows is to run Process Monitor. Process Monitor, you will be shocked. If you've never run this before, I'm about to shock you a little bit with what you're going to see. I don't have Windows running here. You'll have to do this on your own machine. But this will bring up, it effectively logs everything that's going on inside of Windows. And when I say it logs everything that's going on inside of Windows, it's logging everything going on inside of Windows. You turn it on, you're suddenly going to have thousands of lines of information in this log. There's no way you can read it fast enough for what's going on in Windows. This is going to tell you everything that happens, the way applications are working, what they're accessing, what they're referring to, what they're referencing inside the registry. If you've ever had an application hang and it sits there 30 seconds and finally keeps going, this utility will tell you why. You'll probably be able to fix it. Most of the stuff in here, you'll have no idea what it's talking about, but that's a great starting point. Those are the things where you can explain to a prospective employer What skills do you have? Why should I hire you? Like, well, let me tell you about a problem I ran into last week that I solved using Process Monitor. You can go down the whole thing, how you did it, what it was, how you looked at this, what you saw, how you did the research to understand what you saw, and then what you did to resolve the problem, and there it's fixed. And they'll say, what's Process Monitor? And you get to explain. Oh, it's amazing. You won't believe it. The things it can do are great. That's the real key. So those are the two things I really recommend that go a little beyond in that how do I get started? User groups, get as much lab time at home as you can. Get your home lab going. Get some stories. When you go into an interview, you should already have 3 stories you can tell. The more stories you have, the better. And by the way, this works in every job you're going to have. You need stories. I worked in a job, my last 10 or 15 years, 20 years, was where I was a technical representative of a product. And so I walk into somebody who's never seen this product before, and I'll say, you won't believe what happened last week with how this customer used this product to save the world. And I tell them the story. And they're like, that's a great story. You need those stories. They will work all the way through your career because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve a problem. And if you can explain to somebody, not the technical details of every bit and byte hexadecimal binary thing, if you can just explain, this is why we couldn't go home and have dinner with our families, and we fixed this, and now everybody can go home and have dinner with their families. That hits a pain point that everybody understands. All right, back to the questions. I spoke too long about that answer. We just went on and on and on. Question in the chat room, are duplicate file deleting programs advisable? We'll talk about duplicate file deleting programs, and we'll also talk about cleaning programs, because both of those are things you should be careful with. So the first thing that you should always know about these maintenance programs is, for the most part, they aren't very good. Most of them are not very good. Very few of them are good. I'll say it that way, because there is some value to doing this. I used a registry cleaning program once on my Windows computer and wiped the whole thing out. Boom. Reinstall from scratch. That was obviously a very, very learning experience to be able to do that. These programs can be very destructible. And I personally don't recommend you running them unless you have a very specific problem you're trying to solve that you're hoping this will, and only then if you have a couple of backups and you've tested the backups and you know you can restore from them very easily. In fact, it's very easy to get a backup of your registry. Why didn't I do that? I don't know. And I'm an idiot. That's why. I am a moron that I didn't get a backup on my registry before I hit one button and deleted the registry. Not the whole registry, just 90% of it. That was the problem. So your question was very specifically about file deleting programs, and the file deleting programs, duplicate files deleting programs. I have one that I use on Mac OS that I use all the time because I'm constantly creating duplicates, or I was constantly creating duplicates. I put a different system in place where I don't do this anymore. So I looked at a very specific set of folders, and I only deleted things that I knew were data files. They were presentation files. They had no operating system files or anything else. And I had backups beyond that. And I've had to go to the backups occasionally. I'll be working in a presentation. Things will get deleted and saved, and I'll have to go back to the backup. And in Mac OS, it's very easy. You open up a window, you go back in time with Time Machine, take the one from yesterday, drag it over, and you're done. You know, those types of backup systems can be incredibly valuable. Windows has really their own backup system built into the versioning. And if you're not taking advantage of versioning in Windows, that's a great utility and functionality to have. That can save your bacon whenever you're having a problem. Are they advisable? They're not advisable. I don't advise using them, but sometimes you don't have a choice. There's too many files. They're everywhere. For the most part, they aren't that useful because there really aren't that many duplicate files on your system, generally, unless you're doing something very specific that's causing a duplicate of files to occur. That may be different. Maybe you accidentally restored a section of your drive to a different folder. I don't know. But it seems like using a duplicate file deleting program may be outside the scope. One thing I do use and have used before is a cleaning program. One that I've used before is CCleaner. That becomes useful to have. That is a well-known cleaning program. But even then, I only use subsets of its functionality to try to clean off programs that aren't cleaning as well as I would hope. So that's another one where I really don't like running this program, but I can't get rid of this particular thing. This is the only way I know how to get rid of it. It's the only way I care to get rid of it, because doing it other way would take forever to be able to get rid of that. So that's why whenever you start looking at trying to find a file deduplicator, a cleaner, manual is always best. Only go to these programs when there's really no other choice to do that. And then that's what you do. The one that I tend to use much more is a program that will look at my entire drive and map it out. Let's see if I have one way to do this easily. I don't think I do. Do I have one? Let me see. Let me drop one here and see if I can scan a drive reasonably on here. I really don't. Oh, well. It seemed like a good idea at the time. There we go. I'll have to bring this up. I will find a picture of this one so that you can see it as well. So one of the ones I use for disk space analysis is on Windows is Windorstat. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but here's a bad image of it. There's a pretty good image of it. There you go. So there's a lot of programs like this out there. It will analyze your entire drive, put different color codings into the different file types, and then map out for you how much of the drive each one of these files and types of files are using, and separates them out into folders. And you can go further down. You can click on one of these. If you're trying to find out where did all my disk space go, this is free. Windorstat, Windirstat. Windows Directory Statistics, Windorstat. This will show you, because I have these monster files. So right now we're recording this. It's going to be tens of gigabits of file size when this is done. And I'll probably have to edit because of the problems we had earlier. I'll have to check online and see if that's really the case. So when we start looking at, do we have something we can look at to find these files on my drive? I don't have any more space left on my SSD. I can find it here. I can open one of these programs and it will hunt it down. And this doesn't change anything. It's up to me to click on the file, figure out what it is, and at that point decide, do I delete it? Do I keep it? So you've got a little bit of control over these. So that's one way you can start looking at this and figuring out, am I doing the right thing? Is that the right piece I should worry about? I haven't seen somebody else said, oh yeah, use Space Sniffer. That's another one of those. I haven't used that one before, but sounds like somebody in the chat room has used Space Sniffer before. Similar idea with that tree view of the drive. So you can start to find the problems, find the files, what's sucking up all the hard drive space, get rid of it. That's when I can really start worrying about, start focusing on when you're trying to figure out where the problems are. That would be a good way to do it. I got another question in on my email. Let me find that one. This one I may have answered earlier. And most of the time, the questions all surround what's going on with the current version of the A+ certification. Because the A+ certification right now, as I mentioned, has been around since December of 2015, so really 2016. So as I mentioned, we're coming up on 3 years of the current A+ version. And so let me quickly review that again for others, because this one comes up quite a bit in what we're doing. There it is. So the current version, the 229.01, 229.02, been out since December 15th. A lot of people think that it will just drop off the map 3 years later, and that on December 15th, 2018, a new one will replace it. That never happens. A new one might show up somewhere around that time frame, but what tends to happen is there's another 6 months that the current version will still be available once a new version is released. And the reason CompTIA does that's relatively obvious. If you've been studying, you just started studying in December, and suddenly it went away, you'd have to start over again. So instead of doing that, they give you this ramp of 6 months. I think most people can get through both exams in 6 months. That's a pretty good time. So that's one where you really should focus on just getting through the current content. I probably would never wait to take a certification exam. Once you get into the December timeframe, you might want to see what's happening with the A+ exam. So some people like to take the latest version. They feel that's just something they really are compelled to do. But I will tell you, even in December, let's say that a new version of the 901 exam comes out in December, you're still not going to have a lot of materials out. There probably won't be a lot of books. There's not going to be a lot of video courses. There's not going to be a lot of Q&A on the new exams. That takes a little bit of time to get all of that content written. It takes a massive amount of time to produce video courses and a massive amount of time to write books. So this takes a number of months for these things to finally start trickling out into availability. So even if the exam came out on December 15th, there still might not be a lot of books available. Your still best bet might be with the older exam. And I will tell you that people will take these older exams up until the last day they're available. They go right up until the edge. This is what's happening right now with the Network Plus, the Security Plus, which expire. Network Plus is at the end of, Security Plus is at the end of this month, and Network Plus next month, or vice versa. I don't know why I've mixed those up in my head right now. So people tend to take their time with these things, or they wait until the last minute, or whatever it is. And that's one of the things, because if you've bought an A+ book, you bought a 229.01 and a 229.02. If a new version comes out and you have to shift gears, you kind of have to throw all that stuff out and start over again, because the exam objectives are probably going to be pretty different. Will there be similar things? Yes, but there will be so much that's new that you're going to be in a position where you're going to want to have updated content. So that's one of the challenges you'll run into with those things as well, is that you have to pick and choose and set the timing of these things so it works exactly the way you would expect, because you don't want to run into problems with those things as well. In the chat room, some Starsky's asking about the required number of CEUs required for the A+. I'm assuming you mean for the renewal of the A+ certification. This is, it depends. The A+ has a different number of CEUs that are required versus Network Plus versus Security Plus versus the others that are out there. There are so many different options available for these. On the CompTIA website, you can see you need 20 CEUs for the A+. You need 30 to renew the Network Plus. You need 50 to renew Security Plus, 50 for Cloud Plus, 60 for CISA Plus, and 75 CEUs for the CASP, the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner. So A+, certainly the smallest number. Now, of that 20, you can only earn a certain number of types of CEUs in any 3-year renewal period. So, for example, if you're watching this, I told you, if you watch the first hour, I would send you one webinar category CEU. And I think they have a list of CEUs. Where are they? Maybe not in this list. Come on. Because why would you put them on that page? That would make perfect sense. If we have a list of CEUs, I don't know. It's in here somewhere. Earn a complete, do this, do the other. Well, who knows where they put it? It might even be on that page somewhere. But why would you put it just on the page? I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. We'll have to hunt around the page and find those. There's a document on the CompTIA website. There they are somewhere. Here they are. Renew with multiple activities. Attend a live webinar, attend a conference, complete a college course, complete a training course, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the things, for instance, attending a live webinar. If you're renewing the A+, you can only use 4 CEUs to renew a live webinar. So that's one where it's a good example. You can't watch 20 of my webinars and renew your A+. That's what that means. I think that's probably a good idea. I think that's probably an exceptional idea. You don't want anybody doing any one thing 20 times. Imagine watching 75 of my webinars just to earn the CASP renewal. No, of course not. You can only watch 20, which still seems like a lot, but you got to get to 75. So I guess that's what that's about. All of those CEUs you can earn are out on the CompTIA website. That's the best way to do it. Yes, in the chat room, Vincent's mentioning that the Windows 7, a lot of things with Windows 7 are going away. Windows 7 support is going away. The Windows 7 certifications from Microsoft will be retired at the end of July, so we only have a few weeks left for that. And those certifications will go away forever. So Microsoft clearly shifting their focus to Windows 10, forcing you to Windows 10, whether you like it or not in some cases. They did apologize for everybody who didn't want to go to Windows 10, but they woke up in the morning and their Windows 7 machine was suddenly running Windows 10. They were really sorry. Now you're running Windows 10. Ha ha. Made you upgrade. Ha ha. That's the way it goes. That's Microsoft's plan. That's their strategy, is to get everybody on Windows 10. For many people, that's great. Windows 10 works fabulous. They like it. It's what they wanted to do. But you can see that less control is there these days. You used to be able to control your machine. You used to be able to control when it would do updates. You used to control when the drivers would update. Not anymore. So Microsoft has made it clear they're in control of your machine now. You're going to run Windows 10. And if from Microsoft's perspective, this is a great idea. Have everybody on Windows 10. And it sounds like what they're going to do is very similar to what Apple has done for the past, how many years now? 10 years, 15 years, where it's been OS 10. It has been the same numbered operating system in Apple for an incredibly long time. It's always been OS 10, but they've just simply updated OS 10. This OS 10 version is High Sierra. This OS 10 version is El Capitan. This OS 10 version is, they just keep adding names, animals and places and things to it. And that's how they don't change the name of it. They just make these incremental upgrades. And the version of OS 10 that's running today is extremely different than the version that came out originally. I expect Microsoft will be doing the same thing because it's very easy to maintain that way. They can very easily get rid of these older operating systems. They're not dramatically changing the user interface or the functionality. They're simply doing incremental upgrades so people don't really get angry about something like that. They kind of found a version that works for them. There's somebody in the chat room that says you can control those upgrades if you have the Pro Edition. No, you're adorable no, you can't. I mean, they tell you can, and they give you instructions on how you can control the upgrades and updates in Windows. It doesn't work. Sorry. Nope. But I think that's what they're trying to do, is now that they've got everybody on Windows 10 by now, by the way. I know it's not 100%. They got everybody on Windows 10. They have a huge number of people. I wonder if I look at my analytics of the people hitting my website and running Windows, how many of them now, let's just say in the last 30 days, are running Windows 10. I think we should be able to figure that out, right? Let's log in. I know you can't see this. I'm kind of looking at it on my screen. Let's look at some details. No, I don't want real time. Let's just look at the audience details, the demographics. Let's look at technology and browser and OS. So let's break it down to operating systems. I don't want browser, the secondary dimension. I want to be, can I just see, it says browser and OS. I don't want browser and OS. I want just the operating system. Let's break it down. And for this breakdown. I want to see, not browser, but OS. Let's see if I am able to do this easily. I thought I would be able to. I might be wrong. And work through those. So in the chat room, one of the folks was asking, the question is, people say, only way to haul off updates is to lie about being on a metered connection, but eventually they catch up to you and remind you you're missing up. None of these answers really work, do they? How about don't update it until I tell you to? That's a crazy idea. I know. That's what I'd like you to do. Stop doing this. Okay, I found the operating system button. So Windows, approximately in the last, this is just the last week, but let's go the last month, from June 11th to July the 11th. It's over the summer, but this at least gives us the last 31 days of data. 63% of the people coming to my site are Windows. So of those Windows, and then we'll talk about bogus websites in a moment. Of the Windows operating systems coming to my site, 67.83% of the users, so this is not number of pages viewed, but individual people coming to my site, 67%, and we're talking about tens of thousands of visitors that are in a month that are running Windows, 67.83% are Windows 10. That is a massive number for a relatively new operating system, given the amazing base of users for Windows 7. Windows 7 is 25.49, Windows 8.1, 3.84%. So Windows 7 is about 25%, Windows 8.1, 4%. That was actually never really that different all the way through Windows 8, quite honestly. Windows Vista, 1.86%, almost 2%. And Windows XP, 0.24%. Windows 2000, 0.01%. I have Windows NT users hitting my site. Still there. So Windows 10, part of what they did was they asked for permission. So they didn't tell you that it was going to be an upgrade. They said, hey, we want to upgrade your machine. And if you hit the X to get rid of the window, they took that as a yes. I am not making that up. They presented something on their screen. They presented a box on the screen. You can find this. It's well documented. For your running Windows 7, they put a box up on the screen that says, we notice you're running Windows 7. What you really should do is run Windows 10. And there's a button at the bottom that says upgrade now. There was not a button that said cancel anywhere, but there was the close button at the top. People hit the X at the top and closed that. Microsoft said they didn't say no. So they upgraded them. And then afterwards it said, oops, sorry. We're sorry you're upgraded. And now 68% of the people come to my site running Windows or Windows 10. That's why. Kind of smart, really. I mean, they went through a little bad press. But if you're Windows 7 users, you went to Windows 10, you probably thought Windows 10 was pretty nice because Windows 10 is pretty nice. You just didn't have the choice. They kind of forced you into that one. So that's why the numbers are so big for Windows 10. So I think that's what you're going to see. And I think in the next update to the A+ exam, it's probably going to focus a lot on Windows 10 and Windows 7. I think there's going to be a lot there. See, somebody else said they've been trying to figure out the Windows 10 auto update thing. Still haven't figured it out. You're not gonna. In fact, one of the things they did was when you finally got the right settings to disable the auto update, if you turned out that I think they pushed down a security update that they did regardless of what your settings are, because they have a way to force the updates down. I think I'm remembering this right. And then they fixed that so you couldn't turn it off anymore. They flipped it back. Oh, certainly you didn't mean not to get updates. Since I'm here, let me turn that back on for you. Oof. You almost went without automatic updates. Sure, I'm glad we're here to fix that for you. It's remarkable. So this is the thing that system administrators now have to deal with who have Windows 10 in their environment. So they're constantly making sure they've got all the things set up so that they're not running into this problem. This is at home, it's not that big a deal. At home, you kind of want it to update. At home, if it's at your parents' house, please update. Please make sure that it's patched. Make sure that they're not going to get an infection. But for your business, it becomes a little more challenging. And that's the problem I have, is that I have a system that acts as a media server and it just reboots in the middle of the night. But it's a 24/7 machine. Stop rebooting. No problem. I'll stop rebooting. Boop, reboots. I thought I told you stop rebooting. Yeah, well, you didn't turn off that thing to tell it to stop rebooting. All right, let me turn off that thing to tell it to stop rebooting. Reboot it again. Why'd you reboot? Well, it's the third thing. You didn't turn that one off. This is literally how it goes. So that's the challenge that you do. Somebody managed to get temp updates installed on the device for 35 days. That may be a record. That may indeed be a record for those. So it is kind of obnoxious in the way it works, but eventually you figure out which settings those are, and you're not going to deal with that anymore. And hopefully that's not going to be a big deal. So that's the challenge we all have whenever we're trying to manage operating systems. So learn everything you can about Windows 7 and the way it works, Windows 10 and the way it works. You're going to be asked about these things when you finally get into a point where you have to provide that level of support with these devices. And this is one where I think that's actually, you could actually be a pretty knowledgeable person if you can solve those types of problems. If you walk in and they say, do you know how to stop Windows 10 from updating? You say, yes, I do. Have you checked this? Have you checked this? Have you checked that? Have you checked this other thing? They go, okay, do that. Get it so that we know what we're doing. That's some pretty valuable knowledge. So in a way, Microsoft not making these things completely transparent gives you an advantage. The inherent opaqueness of the operating system provides you with an opportunity, and you should take advantage of this. That's any operating system. When we're talking about Windows 7, there's just as many problems with every other operating system. Every other operating system has their idiosyncrasies. Things they do really well, things they don't do really so good. So it just depends on what you're doing and how it works. I've been trying to work on an iMac. The entire screen is glued on, and the only way in is you have to cut the glue to get into. That's pretty crappy. So every system, and don't even, I know it gets to be a little bit of a problem, but you can figure it out. This is your opportunity, is to figure that out. Anytime you run into something, you say, that's an issue, I've got a pain point associated with that problem, you should take advantage of that. You should learn everything there is to know about that pain point, how people are using and working around that pain point, and what you can do to help solve that problem with other people's computers. Quickly in the chat room, before I completely lose my voice, one of the questions comes up. Can I describe the difference between PowerShell and the command prompt? And should you be focusing on one or the other? So let's step through both of these very quickly. So both of them seem like they would be able to do similar things. It seems like PowerShell seems to be the one that you would use all the time. And you certainly could do that. Command prompt has been here forever. This is how this all worked. This is the history of command prompt and where it came from. So back in the day, prior to there being Windows, there was DOS. If you pop open a command prompt and you're sitting there at $! That's DOS. That used to be what the computer was. There was no Windows, there was no mouse, there was a keyboard and $! And then you have to go from there. dir enter. md /test enter. You were typing all of this in to make that system do what it was supposed to do. That was it. When Microsoft created Windows back in the Windows 1.0 days, which I used, and Windows 2.11, which I used quite a bit with Photoshop. No, was it with Photoshop? What was it with? It might have been. Those products, Microsoft said, let's create Windows. Windows will build on top of DOS. So you start DOS, your DOS starts up, and you have that command prompt, and you type WIN, and you hit enter, and suddenly this graphical display started. And when Windows XP came along, really Windows 3.1 and Windows XP, it kind of worked the same way. It started up DOS, and then it started Windows. Windows XP started to deviate away from that. And eventually Windows as an operating system, as a core kernel, became the core. But still there was this backward compatibility with these older applications and ways of doing things, and ways to interact with the operating system that weren't all graphical. And that's what Command Prompt now provides. It's now kind of reversed, that you start Windows now, and then you can open up a Command Prompt and gain additional command line access to the operating system. And it's still there. And if you had one of these old DOS programs, it would probably still work in there. So, or maybe not, but you've got the option. So that's how that command prompt is still there. The problem is that because the command prompt has such this long-standing legacy in computing, it doesn't really know how to do a lot of Windows things. If you wanted to modify user settings in Active Directory, command prompt doesn't really know how to do that. If you wanted to tell your Windows operating system to disable and enable a service, command prompt, there's some utilities in there that do some of those things, but it's not part of the shell itself. It's not part of what command prompt does. So what Microsoft did is, we'll create kind of a new version of command prompt, but we're not going to call it command prompt, because then that has a bad connotation. We'll call it PowerShell. And PowerShell now is sort of the Windows command prompt. It's the Windows terminal that gives you complete access to almost every aspect of the Windows operating system. If you're a system administrator and you want to set up an automated function that fires off at 2 a.m. and checks for certain things in the Active Directory infrastructure, copies those over, moves them into some different files, modifies that, copies them off to a Windows machine, transfers these off to a separate server. All of those things are all in PowerShell. And PowerShell is built for not just the functionality, but the extensibility of what you need to do. It has these applets inside of it that you can run that perform these functions inside of PowerShell, because it now opens up the entire operating system for modification, for viewing, for automation. It's all in that PowerShell. It really is a PowerShell. It is a really nice way to automate and manage Windows systems from that single window. Very nice to have that there. And so that's why when we talk about, and it's in the A+, there's a mention of PowerShell. And that's why you should know that it's there. You should understand how people are using it. You should use it. Open it up. If it's not installed in your system, I think it's now part of Windows 10 by default. So just open it up, try it out, run through a few things, hit the help utility, find some how-tos on the internet, run it in your lab, and now you've got a story when you go to that interview about how you were able to tweak PowerShell to perform a particular function. So that is what, in a very long, drawn-out description, what PowerShell is. So there you go. Well, I think that is really effectively going to be the end of the study group today. For some reason, poor YouTube had a problem there early on. We've been pretty solid here for the last more than an hour. So who knows? We'll have to figure out those things as we go along. Nothing is ever perfect. We'll figure out those. I'm glad we were able to get everything back up and running, though. Thanks for joining us this week on the study group. We've got a Network Plus study group next week. I'm going to be going back over the replay that's on YouTube. If we're missing information or it just doesn't look quite right or there's a problem, I have a local version of it here. I will edit and upload that. That takes a day or so because it's so big and there's a lot to upload, but I'll make sure everyone gets a full and complete version of this. Same thing for the podcast that's out there. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. We could not do this without you. We will do another one of these next week, Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern, same time, same place. Check back in for our Network Plus study group. Otherwise, we will see you next month on the next A+ study group. Thanks, everyone.